Welcome to your daily cybersecurity news deep dives.
Sounds like we have a lot to cover today.
We do. AI-powered ransomware, healthcare security, it's all on the table.
Well, let's jump right in then.
Sounds good. Let's start with ransomware.
All right, ransomware. Definitely seeing some shifts happening there. New players like Funksec are shaking things up.
Yeah, they're definitely making a splash, claiming over 100 attacks just last month, and using AI to develop their malware.
It's interesting though, right? They're using cutting-edge tech, but then asking for surprisingly small ransoms, often like $10,000.
Yeah, it's almost like a volume approach rather than going after the big fish.
Some are even saying they might be targeting victims they've already hit in the past, just casting a wider net.
Makes you wonder, though, if AI development becomes more accessible, could that mean more of these smaller attacks?
Oh, absolutely. It's a scary thought, but it could completely change the threat landscape. Suddenly, anyone could be an attacker.
Protecting your data is going to require a whole new mindset in that world. Speaking of data, DeepSeek AI, that Chinese startup with a low-cost AI assistant, got hit with a cyber attack.
Yeah, and had to restrict new users. And it's all happening right as their app climbs to the top of the App Store. Makes you wonder.
Right. Is this really a cyber attack or just their system cracking under pressure? They've made some pretty bold claims about their tech.
Definitely some skepticism in the industry about their costs. Hard to say for sure what's going on.
Either way, though, it highlights a huge issue, AI system security. As we integrate AI more and more, making sure it's secure is absolutely essential.
Absolutely. What happens when the AI itself is the target?
Like that vulnerability they found in Meta's LLM framework, Llama.
Right. Stemmed from their use of the Pickle library. It could have allowed for remote code execution, which, data breaches, resource theft, even control of the entire model.
And this was Meta.
They patched it quickly, but it definitely shows how important secure coding is, especially for open source AI.
Yeah, it's a balancing act for sure. Innovation and security. Finding that middle ground is key. Now onto the government side of things. Seems the U.S. is stepping up their efforts to improve healthcare security.
Right. IPI, they're proposing some stricter rules around safeguarding those electronic health records.
Mandatory encryption, multi-factor authentication, better incident response plans, the whole 9 yards.
Seems like a direct response to the spike in attacks targeting healthcare. It's a shift in focus. Instead of just prevention, now it's about resilience and being ready to bounce back.
We're seeing this globally, too, like with the EU's DORA regulations for financial institutions.
Yep. Ordo, just like HIPAA, making sure institutions can withstand these attacks. It's not just about keeping attackers out, it's about knowing what to do if they get in.
Exactly. It's not just about building higher walls. It's about having a plan for when they inevitably get scaled.
But there are some concerns about the cost of these changes, especially for smaller providers, and whether these rules will be effective without a change in the cybersecurity culture.
Well, rules are useless if no one follows them. And speaking of culture, there's that ongoing issue of the gender gap in cybersecurity. We're facing a huge skills gap, and yet we're missing out on a ton of talent.
Yeah, the numbers are really stark. Depending on where you look, women only make up between 11 and 24% of the workforce.
So we need to be introducing cybersecurity as a career option early on, especially to young women, showing them how many opportunities there are.
For sure. It's about breaking down those stereotypes. But it's not just about early exposure. It's about creating an environment where women feel welcome and empowered to succeed.
That means addressing the specific challenges they face in the industry. Flexible work arrangements, a culture that values different perspectives, and more women in leadership positions.
Right. They need to see those role models, people who inspire them. We still got a long way to go, but at least there's more attention on this issue now, which is encouraging.
Cybersecurity needs women, and we need to make sure it's a place where they can thrive. Let's switch gears a bit and look at some international cybersecurity incidents. The British Museum had to close some galleries because of an IT issue caused by a former employee.
Classic insider threat. Really highlights how important it is to have strong procedures for when employees leave, revoke access, minimize those risks, especially if someone is disgruntled.
It's a good reminder that even small oversights can have big consequences. On that note, we have DTrust, a subsidiary of the German Federal Printing Office, got hit with a cyber attack.
And it might have compromised some personal data, names, addresses, birthdays, all that. For people who applied for signature and seal cards, those are used for a ton of secure transactions in Germany.
So yeah, this is a big deal. This data could be used for identity theft and fraud on a huge scale. Luckily, they're saying the cards themselves weren't affected, but still.
And get this, it might not have been criminals behind the attack. Could have been a security researcher. Yeah, this researcher accessed the data through an open API and then later on told Dtrust about the vulnerability.
But why later on?
They were worried about legal trouble, which, brings up some complicated questions about responsible disclosure. Where's the line between ethical hacking and breaking the law?
It's a really gray area. But it does show that even organizations focused on security can have vulnerabilities. And sometimes they come from unexpected places.
Yeah, it really does. Cybersecurity is like a constant game of cat and mouse. You got to be ready for anything.
You have to be. And sometimes it's not some big hacking group. It's a little mistake that causes the most damage, like that vulnerability in Meta's LLM we talked about.
Exactly. And speaking of vulnerabilities, there's a new VPN backdoor making headlines. Uses something called magic packets to stay hidden.
Magic packets.
Yeah, so instead of constantly talking to a command and control server, this backdoor just sits there, dormant, until it gets a specific signal. Makes it really hard to detect. This one was found on VPNs running Juniper Networks' Junos OS. Affects dozens of them. Could give attackers a way into all sorts of corporate networks.
Another reminder to keep your software updated and patch those vulnerabilities.
Absolutely. A breach through this backdoor could be devastating for any organization, especially if they handle sensitive data.
And let's not forget about cryptocurrencies. As their value goes up, they become bigger targets for criminals.
Definitely. We've seen a huge spike in crypto spieler detections. That's malware designed to steal passwords and anything related to crypto wallets.
So it's not just exchanges and mining operations anymore.
No, now they're going after individual users too.
Which means everyone needs to be taking cybersecurity seriously. Strong passwords, multi-factor authentication, watching out for phishing scams, all of it.
It's essential. Doesn't matter if you're a big corporation or just someone dabbling in crypto.
Most attacks are about disruption or stealing data, but sometimes hackers have other motives. There was a group in Tbilisi, Georgia, that used their skills for a musical protest.
Oh yeah, I read about that. Hacked into the city's public transportation system.
Started playing patriotic pro-European anthems and messages criticizing the government.
A bit of an unconventional cyber attack. Shows that it's not always about money or espionage.
Right, sometimes it's about making a statement. But let's get back to that cybersecurity skills gap. It's a tough problem to solve.
It is. As technology keeps evolving, we need more people who understand the risks. AI, IoT, edge computing, it's all happening so fast.
Cybersecurity is a constantly moving target.
And we need experts who can keep up. Traditional cybersecurity isn't enough anymore.
We need people who can think ahead, anticipate the next big threat.
Exactly. CISOs, they need to be proactive, constantly learning and adapting.
And speaking of CISOs, Jen Easterly just stepped down as director of CISA.
Yeah, her final interview was pretty insightful. Highlighted some successes like that ransomware vulnerability warning pilot, but also acknowledged the threats that are still out there.
Like ransomware. It's not going away anytime soon.
Mm.
And she also talked about the threat from PRC cyber actors.
Cybersecurity is never going to stand still. We need strong leadership to navigate all these challenges.
Absolutely. So what are CISOs focusing on in 2025? Top priorities. What are we seeing?
Number one is still strengthening that overall security posture. Protecting sensitive data, that's always going to be at the top.
Makes sense. You got to have a solid foundation.
Right. And then upgrading IT and data security, making sure they're resilient. Cloud data and systems, that's a big one too, with everyone moving to the cloud.
User training, security awareness, that's huge too.
Definitely. People are often the weakest link.
And simplifying IT security infrastructure, making it more manageable, getting rid of all the complexity.
It's back to basics, really. Build a strong foundation and then go from there.
But it's not just the fundamentals. CISOs are also looking at identity and access controls, threat intelligence, managing third-party risks.
And AI is becoming a bigger focus.
Which is interesting. We talked about the risks, but CISOs are also looking at how AI can help them.
Right. They're using it for threat detection, monitoring, automation.
AI is a double-edged sword in cybersecurity, both a threat and a potential solution.
Definitely something to keep an eye on. And with so much on their plate, CISOs are starting to share the responsibility.
Yeah, it's a shift away from that lone wolf mentality. Cybersecurity can't be a one-person show.
It really can't. Everyone needs to be involved. It's got to be part of the culture.
Exactly. From the top down, everyone needs to be on board.
So before we wrap things up, there are a couple articles with some practical advice.
Always good to share some tips. Raise that awareness.
The first one focuses on Data Privacy Week, which, by the way, is happening right now. They've got 6 tips for protecting your personal information.
All right, let's hit some highlights. First up, check those privacy settings. On all your devices, all your accounts, you'd be surprised how many people just stick with the defaults.
Yeah, you really need to be aware of what you're sharing online. Think before you post, especially anything sensitive. And public Wi-Fi, be careful with that.
For sure. And know your rights. GDPR, CCPA, these laws are there to protect you, so learn about them. Good advice. The second article is aimed at managed service providers, or MSPs. Talks about some key trends in managed detection and response, MDR.
MDR is becoming really important. Cyberattacks are getting more and more complex. It's hard to keep up.
Exactly. MDR provides that 24/7 monitoring and response, often using AI and automation to stay one step ahead.
And the article points out how much more sophisticated attacks are becoming. Cybercriminals are using some really advanced techniques.
It's an arms race, and we're seeing more cloud-based MDR solutions.
Makes sense. More and more organizations are moving their operations to the cloud.
And finally, the article emphasizes that relationship between MSPs and their clients. It needs to be a real partnership built on trust.
Security is a team effort. Everyone needs to be working together. Open communication, shared responsibility, that's what it takes.
Couldn't agree more. And that's a wrap for our cybersecurity news roundup. We covered a lot of ground today.
We did. AI-powered ransomware, government initiatives, practical tips, the works.
It's a lot to keep up with, that's for sure. But staying informed is so important.
Absolutely. It's the first step to protecting yourself and your organization.
But before we go, a final thought. As AI becomes more and more integrated into our lives, how will that impact the threat landscape?
That's the big question. Will we see more attacks like Funksec using AI to their advantage? Or will AI be the key to better defenses?
It's a fascinating, complex issue, and it's going to shape the future of cybersecurity. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and stay safe.